lots of those.
Well, can we go to the kitchen next?
Let's do that.
Oh, good. I'm right behind you. If I may.
Yeah.
Barbara, when I saw this, and I wanted to tell you that we're going to edit in some of the wonderful reenactments that they did here for the Civil War exhibition. And we're going to, so when Barbara's speaking, you're going to be seeing what I think the kitchen looked like way back during the Civil War time. But why don't you tell me a little bit about it today?
Well, the kitchen is really a room that is brought to life by having cooking activities going, and it was so wonderful having the reenactors here because they did use our fireplace. This kitchen was added around 1830, but even though at this time, 1830, in very sophisticated households, they already had wood stoves, here in the country, they were still building cooking fireplaces. So we do have the original crane and containing the hot water kettle.
Oh, it pulls right out.
Yeah, it does, so that you can move the fire around. You can hang various things from hooks on it. They did, and you probably have pictures of the cooking in the old Dutch oven, which is essentially a kettle that you put coals underneath and on the lid. Much of the cooking in the fireplace was done in front of the fire, not directly over it. And this is a tin reflector oven, very much like a rotisserie that we use today, with a door that you can open so that you can look inside and see how the meat is cooking. There's a crank, and if I turn it around, you'll see it better.
So you could turn the meat as it was in there?
Yes, there's a spit here where the meat was put, perhaps a fowl, and there also are hooks where you could hang fish or small birds or whatever, and then this whole device is put in front of the fireplace, and the cooking is done by the reflection of the heat against the tin. You didn't have to put the meat right
I've never
in the
seen one of
fire.
those before.
They're quite rare, and we found it in an auction recently. We're very pleased to have it. This is another type of rotisserie. This is something you could lay chops on and put coals underneath and turn the meat and so forth.
Were these very expensive at the auction?
Yeah, pretty expensive. Although there's a lot of skill, and if you try to buy a replica, they're also very expensive. In here is the bake oven. I don't know if you saw this in work, but this is a very, very large bake oven. When we acquired the building, the previous owners or occupiers of the building didn't even know there was a fireplace. This was completely covered with plasterboard, and the oven had been taken off the outside of the building so that they didn't know there was an oven here. But the hole, when we opened up this wall and found the fireplace, we also found the hole for the oven. And this is the type of device called a peel that's used to put bread in an ordinary household oven, but because our oven is so deep, we had to have a peel custom made to reach the back of our oven. So that shows you.
Can I insert this to show?
Yes, you can, and we'll just watch because the handle is so long.
Okay, let me move back this way. So they would put the bread on here.
Yes,
And then
and slip it way into the oven. And you can see that you've lost almost the whole thing in there. The fire is built in the oven, and then after the oven has been heated with fire for about an hour, you remove the ashes and the coals, and then you can put your bread in and bake it. And to facilitate the removal of the ashes, we even have this ash trap here. And you can scrape the ashes into that hole, and it goes through a passageway and comes right into the fireplace. So nothing is wasted. The coals go right to work in the fireplace.
would you say about 6 feet of this goes in there?
Yes, yes,
Easily, right?
yeah. It's a restaurant. It's a restaurant-size cooking oven.
And you would bake breads and
Breads in there, yeah. They usually started with something that you could cook hot and fast.
potatoes?
That would be later. At the end, you would put in baked beans and things that could cook slowly and just use the residual heat of the oven to cook them. But we have done as many as 36 loaves of bread in this oven.
Next time you do it, I have to taste some.
Well, you come on December 5th, I think it is, a Sunday. We do a Christmas open house and we bake in it. We also have a class going on that's going to meet at various times, a couple of times a month, I guess, of people who are interested in fireside cookery. Many of them, believe it or not, from the Culinary Institute in Hyde Park.
I'd love to come and film that.
Well, that's going to be interesting.
I'd like to do. Now, what about this table?
This is one of those convertible pieces of furniture. The top lifts up and this turns into a bench. But on it we have some examples of ware that we have collected because they're similar to the fragments that we found in our archaeological digging. This yellow ware with the brown sgraffito decoration. We find
Is this clay?
It's clay. These are all made of clay. Brown ware, that's a milk pitcher or a cider jug. The red ware bowl that was used for actually settling out the separating milk and cream. You put the fluid, the milk, fresh milk, in this and then just let it sit and the cream will rise to the top and you can scoop it off and then make butter out of it.
Was lead used in any of this?
Lead was used in, not in this, which is a modern reproduction, but originally there might have been lead used, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is this authentic or a copy?
This is a copy, and we do use it. Again, it's a piece that looks old, it's appropriate, but we don't have to worry if somebody spills something on it or whatever. It's not a museum piece. It's something to be used and enjoyed.
Can we go upstairs now, Barbara?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Let's
We'll
go.
upstairs now. Now, Barbara, before we go upstairs, can you tell me a little bit about the staircase here?
Well, these are the original stairs that we found.
Wide.
They are, unless you're carrying a heavy piece of furniture, then they don't seem wide enough. But they do lead up. At the top of the stairs is a door that goes to a very rough attic, which is over the kitchen area. And then we're going to just go up the stairs and to the right and into the hall.
All right, and what type of wood is here? Do you know?
Just a pine, I think, painted pine. Yeah.
I absolutely, ladies and gentlemen, am intrigued with the carpentership in this particular area, because I'm going to run my hand just to show you, because I don't know how much the camera, it actually bows. It is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. All right, next time we turn the camera on, we'll be upstairs. We owe a great deal of gratitude to the Friends of the Elmendorph. There are over 500, which Barbara had told me. They're the group that's responsible for holding this piece of history in place and not having it deteriorate anymore. You're trying so hard to keep it alive. And the area, we're upstairs now, there's a modern TV and VCR here behind us, which normally obviously wouldn't be here way back when, and that's here to show little videos about the Elmendorph. So Barbara, why don't you tell me a little bit about this particular room we're in?
Well, this is what we sometimes call the gallery or the upstairs hall. It's a rather large space and not a typical space for a domestic or a house type building. We think it probably was made like this and left like this as a place for people who just wanted to spread a bedroll on the floor and not to spend the money to rent a room when they wanted to spend the night. That would be people like traveling peddlers, drovers who were driving cattle to market. You do see this in the few inns of this period that remains, that there's usually an attic space, an unheated space. As you can see, there's no fireplace in this room, but just a place to get out of the weather and to spread out your bedroll on the floor, and for a few cents you could spend the night. It may indeed have been a granary at one time. There's a strange sort of a hole in the wall there that we haven't painted yet. This room is only partially restored, but it's a large door, and it may have been used for loading grain and things like that into this. It did at one time, we believe. That is just as we found it. And so we're leaving all that odd woodwork there as a memory of the past, and someday we'll know the answer.
Barbara, how much would it have been to spend, to open a bedroll here? Do you have any idea to spend the night?
Just a few pence, as they said in those days. They weren't even pennies. Pennies, yes, literally pennies for the night. And we do have 2 private chambers which have not been restored, but they're, yes, we can. They're reached by this hall, which has the interesting cove ceiling. That was probably added like the parlor downstairs around 1810.
Do you know what I like here? The woodwork, the corner pieces here.
Yeah, that's definitely federal architectural detailing. But these 2 rooms are very simple. They haven't been restored, so we've basically been using them as storerooms. But there would be, we're going to restore this one as a chamber. We'll have a couple of beds in there. We know from stories by travelers, people accounts of travelers of the time, that it was not uncommon to have 2 or 3 people, sometimes perfect strangers, in the same bed, and a couple of beds in a small room like that. So we're going to do this room as a period room.
When it was an active inn, did they rent every room in it as a private?
We don't know because we don't have accounts. There are only 2 rooms that would seem to have been bedrooms. We have one other room that has been restored that's used by the Historical Society for an archive room. And then there's a large room over the south room, which is the large room we saw downstairs. When they added that addition, they also created a large space upstairs, which may have been used for meetings also.
Is this an authentic window?
This is a window that is, that's a reproduction window, actually. And in fact, we think that this hall may have at one time have led to a porch outside.
Yeah, because of this, right?
And that there was a door here that we saw before the the plaster was repaired. There was evidence of a doorway there, but we have absolutely no picture of what it might have looked like, so we just can't do that. This is an early door similar to the ones that you see downstairs, and it leads to another chamber. Again, this is a chamber that hasn't been restored, and it's just being used as a storeroom at the moment.
Now, what I find interesting is the difference between the 2 doors. This is the same planks that were used from the floor, from what I see.
Similar. Yeah, the doors don't match. This obviously was not a place where they lavished a great deal. I think there was a lot of using of found materials, reusing of materials.
But this is more elaborate.
Yes, but we don't even know if it's original to this location.
Okay.
But it does fit the hinges. It's the pintle type of hinge, and it fit there.
Barbara, you don't have a lot, or maybe I'm wrong, aside from the photos, you don't have a lot of ledgers or information on this building that someone literally wrote down and kept as an archive?
We haven't come upon anything like that yet. That's not to say it won't surface at some time. We do have some idea from legal records who the various innkeepers were over the period of years. So we have a sort of sequence of ownership, but a lot more research needs to be done. And if we were a museum, we would have a curatorial staff working on that. But in as much as we're a community restoration project, our emphasis has been on preserving the building. And once that's done, then we'll have the leisure to pursue some of those research opportunities.
So if anyone out there, maybe in going through a grandparent's possessions or a great aunt, if you come across a photo or you come across some information, if you can contact the Friends of the Elmendorf, if you choose not to give your original, you would settle for a copy, correct?
Absolutely. We love copies. We don't mind them at all. The information is just as good no matter what form you get it. And thank you for reminding people of that need.
So we're going to reposition the camera and take you into another room. Come on, Donna. Now this room is off the large room that we started this portion of the segment in.
That's correct. And this is over the south room where all the maps and Egbert Benson were hanging. And this room is totally unrestored, and it's been used as a storeroom and a catch-all for a lot of different things, some furnishings that are going to find their way into the other rooms when they're restored. But you do get a picture of this strange configuration here of a gambrel roof building that has been changed to a federal-style building by raising the front. We have here a model of the building that was made actually in cardboard by a school child, but you can see what I mean by a gambrel roof. It's this broken sort of roof line that gives you more headroom in the attic, actually. But on the front, you wind up with a lower wall here, but on the front, they raised the roof to give a straight front that resembles a full two-story. But on the inside of the building, they still kept the dormers of the gambrel roof. So you have these odd shapes here, and that's the kitchen wing that was added. Yes, that's right. But we're over the south room, which is at the other end of the house. Yep. So we're down at that part of the room, and this room does have a fireplace. It is a large room. We know that by 1803, when this addition was added, the building was in full use for meetings, so they needed a lot of space. And
this is an original window.
Yes, that's one of the windows, a fragment of a window that couldn't be restored, but was saved just so that we have the pattern for the trim and the woodwork and so forth, and evidence of the construction.
They liked the color blue.
Yeah, that appears quite frequently in various guises. In this room, you'll notice there are actually 3 different wall covers, because most recently in private ownership, this house was a 2-family house, and this was 3 bedrooms. And we have had people come here who actually lived in this house and point out which was their bedroom.
Now this here, there's a divider in the ceiling.
Yeah.
And this was one room,
Yeah.
and that one was the other room.
Well, there were 3. There was the blue room, the brown room, and the green room.
Oh, I see where it comes
You
in.
see the 3, and you can also see the marks on the floor. In fact, the door saddles are still there.
How small the rooms were.
Yeah, they were small bedrooms, but
Now this we love.
yes. This we'll find room for when we get the room restored. It's a sitz bath. Quite small, has handles so that it can be carried up to the bedroom. And then it was filled with hot water from kettles. And basically you just sat in it.
That's tin.
Yeah, it's made of tin, painted tin.
I wonder how clean you actually got in that.
Well, the baths were taken quite infrequently. And so I would imagine anything was an improvement over nothing.
Barbara, I'm going to ask you a question. If you can't answer, that's okay. But do you have any idea, like, how much a dozen eggs would have been when this house was first put up?
Well, in the first place, you probably wouldn't have purchased eggs because you would have had your own chickens. And you often, in those days, money was not as important as it is today. You would barter. You would trade your eggs for something that you wanted from the general store that you couldn't manufacture at home. You'd trade butter for that purpose. And so I can't give you a dollar and cents value on eggs, but just know that it was not a cash economy. It was generally tended to be more of a bartering kind of situation here in the country, where farmers, the prevailing occupation was farming.
All right, and about refrigeration. We haven't discussed that. Were there like ice houses here, or a shed outside where they kept things cold, or?
Well, in the winter, obviously, it wasn't a problem. The great houses, of course, did have ice houses. We have not done a full archaeological survey of the property. We don't know, nor did the advertisement in 1783 describe any building like an ice house. So we really don't know what was done, but more than likely there was no refrigeration, and they just acquired their food on a daily basis.
Okay. Well, we're going to reposition the camera and we're going to go back downstairs. Thank you, Barbara. This was wonderful. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, first place, what's your name?
Gunnar Sy,
And where do you live, Gunnar?
Statsburg.
And what we're showing you now, Barbara had asked if we wanted to come into what is now called the, what is it, Barbara?
The Rosemary Coons Historical Archive Center. It's the office for the Egbert Benson Historical Society of Red Hook.
And obviously it's located in the Elmendorph. And it had a fireplace here, and this wonderful gentleman did the reproduction of it. So why don't you tell me, so he didn't want to go on camera, so I have to be straight there. Well, what did you do, and can you tell me how you got into this?
Well, I do fireplace mantles for a living, and I think a few people in town had dropped my name to the people up here, and they contacted me, and I came up and looked at what they wanted done, and just proceeded to build it. I had a little bit of very wide pine that I thought would be appropriate to, well, it's the body of the mantle itself. And because the original woodwork in most of these buildings, a lot of virgin timber was available, the old growth, I thought that would match it best. And it was the last that I had, but it was too big for any of the machinery that I had, so I ended up basically similar to a pit sawing situation where they used to saw lumber by hand. I sawed the boards for the mantle out by hand to get the stock for it. And in addition, the moldings are all hand planed, pretty much a handmade mantle, so that you could be as accurate as you can with the work that goes into the end.
Bob, would it be okay if we remove the screen from in front here? Gunnar, how did you get involved with a restoration?
Just again, this particular job, because they had gotten my name, because I don't advertise, I work wholesale down in New York.
Do you do it for other historical sites?
No, I haven't done it. I don't think I've done any historical sites.
Now, was the stone exactly where it is now?
Yeah, I wasn't involved in any of the masonry work or anything. I just came and measured it up. In fact, I didn't even install it. The contractor that they had working here installed it.
Well, I want to say thank you to you because it's a beautiful piece of workmanship.
Well, thank you.
How long did it take?
I think it was probably a couple of days I worked on it.
Well, it was wonderful. We needed it done in just a week, and he had it done
In 1 week, you had it done. In less. Well, Gunnar, I have to tell you, workmanship and craftsmanship is a wonderful gift to any home. And I think as we come into the millennium and the year 2000, we're going to appreciate more handmade woodwork, chairs, tables, than going out and purchasing kind of off a conveyor belt.
Well, I hope so. I hope the wood's there to be available, too. It's getting scarce.
That's the problem. Well, I thank you so much, Gunnar, and thank you for telling us a little bit about the mantle.
Thanks again.
Yeah.
Barbara, can you tell me about this box here?
This box, we really don't know much about it. I should take the cushion off it. It was found here in the attic of the building, and we believe that it's a very early box. We don't know whether it is original to this building or the top will just about fall apart if you try to lift it. Hasn't been restored. It's of European origin, we believe. And we will probably have it restored one of these days. But there was for a period of time an antique shop in this building, so we can never be sure when we find something like that whether this is an original Elmendorph piece or whether it's something that came in later.
Now, the staircase above it goes up to an attic which is closed.
Yes, and that's where we found the box, was up in the attic. There actually is no floor over this room. The only place where there's a floor is over the room where we were just looking at the mantel.
Any other treasures found up there?
A pointer that we love to use when we're doing slide talks. It's kind of a whippy cane or something, and we use it as a pointer.
Well, thank you for this portion, Barbara. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take you back downstairs at this wonderful Elmendorph Inn to show you some memorabilia that was shown to us during the Civil War reenactment here. Beats, how are you today?
Pretty good.
And your husband's going off to war.
Yes, he's actually been off to war now for about, it's been about 8 months now so far.
Are you lonely?
I have enough to keep me busy around the house. When our gentlemen go off to war, that leaves a big hole back at home, and now I'm having to do double duty to make sure ends get met and the house keeps running and what have you.
Do you farm the land if need be?
Actually, my husband's not a farmer. If I lived on a farm, yes, I would be farming, or I would be coordinating with the local help to try and farm. And in Dutchess County, actually, there would have been a lot of farming. I'm trying to think of what he did do when he was here. You caught me off guard on that one. In part because I'm trying to balance back and forth between doing Dutchess and doing the scenario today. The scenario today is actually based on some real events that the 150th actually were involved in after they were mustered in October of 62. In 63, one of their first assignments was down in Baltimore. They were originally guarding the railroads, and then there were detachments that were sent out on different missions, and one of the missions was in Westminster, helping to kind of secure the area for the Union cause. And the local people there tended to be very supportive of the Union cause. There was an inn that was around in that area, so it really would have been realistic that there would have been some inn activity, which is why the women chose to go ahead and do this. Since we had access to this lovely facility here, that was part of why we chose to go ahead with this kind of scenario this weekend.
I want to explain once again, they are in character when I start to speak with them. Well. Some of you are. And therefore, the questions I was asking was pertaining to the character. And it is so wonderful when they go, whoa, I love that part. And they have to think back, because it's very difficult to do this. There are no rehearsals.
No, anything that we're talking with you right now is all impromptu and what have you, and some of us are much more talented, like Cindy and Dave both have a lot of acting background, so they have a lot of skills there. I, on the other hand, am very new to this hobby, as well as I'm not an actress by any means.
You are doing wonderful. You did wonderfully last night, and I appreciate that. Can I ask you about your pin?
Actually, I wasn't going to stay in person for you today, because one of the things I did do, because I knew you were coming today, is I brought some of the originals, like what we look at in terms of trying to understand. The thing you just mentioned is a brooch. This is gutta percha, and if I remember right, gutta percha is it's a hard plastic. It is a synthetic, and it was a type of material that was available back then. Really? Rubber. Well, it's a rubber. It's not plastic like what we think of today. It's more of a hard rubber. I'm sorry. Rubber was available at that time frame. You'll notice out in the men's stuff, they'll have galvanized rubber on the backside of their gum blankets.
Did you make this outfit?
Yeah. This is almost all the women in the Hudson Valley Ladies Aid Society make their own. This is a pattern that was made off of an original. There's a couple of pattern companies that have made patterns available to us. Once you start learning the construction techniques, though, there's a lot of you don't end up using the patterns per se. You use certain pieces of it to get the structure right, but then after that, it's all ad-lib to fit to your specific body.
It is beautiful.
One of the things you'll see on top is what's called a pinner apron. It's pinner because it has it's pinned at the top as opposed to having the ties like what you see today. You'll notice the construction here. This right here is cartridge pleats. It was one of the ways of taking a large piece of material and bringing it down to a smaller.
Yes, because you said it actually started at the bottom and then they did the adjustments as they got higher. Like now, we start here and then hem from the bottom.
Right. Yeah, for the skirts, that's true. One of the things I was going to show you is I did go ahead and bring two originals with me. These are originals from the time period. I can date them to the time period. This one is a water silk. I'll open it up for you. And it demonstrates very nicely several different kinds of construction techniques that were used during that time period. First of all, silk was a very common type of material that you saw in day dresses such as what you see here.
Would we be able to hold it if I held one side and you held the other so she could really... This material is absolutely gorgeous.
One of the things about this one you'll notice is the type of coloring that's in here. It's called water silk, and part of the thing that's so neat about this is if you were to photograph it in black and white, which they did have available back then, they didn't have color, but they had black and white, this would provide something of interest, you know, as opposed to the plain colors or whatever. It wouldn't get entirely lost. It would provide some contrast.
Now, is this a party dress?
No, this is a day dress. This is a dress that somebody would have been wearing if they were to go out walking down the street, going visiting, what have you. You'll notice it has a high collar. It has the pagoda sleeve or a modified pagoda sleeve. It has buttons down the front, but those buttons are not functional. It's actually done with hook and eye. Hook and eye was the most common way of closure for a dress.
How did you acquire this?
This one was acquired out of, I believe it was Massachusetts, up in Pittsfield. There was an antique store up there that a woman is very talented and very knowledgeable in various and sundry periods of clothing, and she knows that we have an interest in this, and so she looks for stuff for us as well.
Was this very expensive, can I ask?
This one was. It's interesting because the price of something like this can vary, anything from pennies to hundreds of dollars, depending on who is selling it to you and how much it's worth to you. That it's not like going to Lords and Taylor or something like that and picking something off the rack. It's a case of where you're finding something it's a used piece of clothing, and it depends on whether the person who has it understands the value of that, or if it is of value to them. You know, for them, it may be taking up space in their attic, and they're just wanting to get rid of it. For, you know, whereas somebody else looks at that, and it's a real find. So for them, it's a real treasure, and for them to let go of it requires a little bit more money.
That's right. Now, is this another one?
This one is another example. This is a mourning outfit. Black was a symbol of mourning, although it's
Well, and when we say mourning, only because...
not AM, but as in grieving.
Someone grieving.
Grieving, right.
Look at that waist.
Again, it has a pagoda sleeve. You can see the kind of ruching that's along the edge right here. Something that's very common is the piping, and you'll notice that this isn't carpentry cording. It's a real fine piping. Most of the piping was handmade out of the same material that would have been used to make the material. Again, you can see the decorative type of buttons as opposed to...
They are beautiful.
As opposed to functional buttons, and again, it's a hook and eye type technique. I think this one still has, this one still has the bones in it, and these are probably whale bones.
And is that handmade, the collar?
That I don't know. I'm not an expert on the laces. I'm starting to learn about that. One of the things about this hobby is that you're always learning and you're always researching and you're always trying to acquire information about it. Lace is one of the areas which I'd like to become a lot more knowledgeable. Lace was a very important part of their attire. It was oftentimes used around the neck. You often saw it as a detachable kind of collar, both a collar as well as the cuffs. And part of the reason there was it was a lot easier to take your collar off and wash your collar than it was to wash an entire dress like this. The entire outfit, if you look at the kinds of things that we're wearing underneath, we start out with a chemise. We have underpinnings. Our underpinnings consist of the chemise, petticoats, corset. Sometimes you'll have a corset cover on. You'll have some other petticoats. And then you finally are getting down to putting your outer clothing on. And part of the functionality of that was that now I can wash my underpinnings and I'm saving the soil, you know, keeping from soiling my outer garments. Oftentimes, if I were in a dress like this and I were at home, I would probably have at least one, if not two, aprons on if I were doing any kind of activity to protect, again, the dress. There's documented cases of where they'll talk about having two or three. They'll have one on that the outer one's the one that's getting dirty from doing something in the kitchen or whatever else. And if somebody comes to the door, they'll take that one off, peel it off, and they have a nice fresh set of clothes underneath.
I have to ask you a question, and I hope it's all right that I do this. The bra today was basically, at that period of time, it was one piece long?
If you wait a second, I can actually show you what one.
We're going to reposition and be right back. Is it all right if I fold these? Now, this would be not mine, but this would be a bra, a period bra.
Yes, this is basically my bra when I'm wearing a hoop dress. It fits around you like this, and it basically squishes you in and pushes you up. And you have...
Oh, it's the period wonder bra.
Right, yeah, of sorts.
Not for me, but...
And there's 3 sets of ties on the back. And what happens is you pull those in to get the appropriate fit. And for any dress that you make, you know what kind of spacing you need in the back in order to be able to fit that dress. It's a very snug fit, and then the bodice itself is very fitted. So you have to make sure that you're not gaining or losing too much weight going up and down.
Now you sewed this?
Yes, this is actually, again, it's based on an original pattern, and it's taught by Carol Ann Schmidt out of Gettysburg. And about once a year, she teaches classes on how to do the corsets. And in a period, you start out on a Friday night, and by Sunday, about 5 or 6 o'clock, you have everything but your binding on the top done. And you're very tired.
Unbelievable. The workmanship is beautiful. See, I'm going to tell you a secret. Donna, who does the filming, is an excellent seamstress.
Well, then she can't look too close.
Don't let her look too good. Now, and you did as well last night. In fact, I'm going to come stand by you over here. About 3 wonderful quilts that were found in an attic, and maybe you could just refresh that a little bit.
Right. Bob actually is from this area, has had many generations in this area, and recently, within the last couple of years, a cousin of his had died, and he was helping to clean out the house. And one of the things that they ended up finding in that house were a set of 3 quilts. Now, these quilts, if I recall right, at least 2 of them were up in the attic, and they were wrapped in brown paper and actually had the date of when they had been wrapped and put up there. They were put up there, if I remember right, around 1950. But along with them were also some documentations, little pieces of paper that said who had made them and about when. Now, at least 2 of these quilts, if you look closely, for For example, on this one, you'll actually see this one is
Oh,
actually,
it's signed,
it's actually signed and dated.
1876.
And what we believe is that these are 3 quilts that were made from a grandmother, a mother, and a daughter, a 3-generation period set of quilts. And earlier you were taking pictures of those people. I believe that the woman with the white cap on was the grandmother. I believe this one was the mother, and I'm not sure which one of those 2 pictures is the picture of the daughter. They're about the right time frame, but we're not sure exactly which one.
Now that says Upper Red Hook, am I right?
Yes, that says Upper Red Hook.
Oh, that is some fun. Now I wonder if he's had them cleaned.
No.
No.
These are pristine. These were in pristine conditions at the time we found them. And if he were to want to have them cleaned, he would have to make sure that he goes to somebody who really knows what they're doing, that this isn't trivial to try and clean period pieces of clothing.
They're in mint condition.
They're in mint condition. Not only that, but from a historical point of view, it's phenomenal for us to be able to look at the material that's in here as wonderful examples of the kind of cotton that would have been available at the time. You know, you can envision cotton dresses made out of so many of these different materials.
And for all those that do not participate in quilt making, quilts years back were like if you had a child and you would take a little piece of that dress, and they became really heirlooms, and also it showed you the different economical issues with a family too sometimes. Someone had told me this, that it may be a husband's shirt, it may be a pair of pants, it may be this, it may be that, and it's all these little pieces of fabric.
Yeah, that you know, we think we're so proud today of being recyclers. Well, we can't put a match to what they were doing back then. Basically, any piece of material that they had multiple uses in its lifetime, whether it be starting out as the mother's dress. And if you think about the volume of material that's in my skirt, when I end up out wearing it for my purposes, I would turn around and then for Junior would make a shirt out of it, or for Susie Q I'd have another small dress made out of it. It could go into curtains. Curtains could go into quilts. It could go into rags that were used in other ways. So, you know, there was the lifetime of a product was a lot longer than what we do today. We tend to use and toss, whereas they made the most out of everything that they had, that it was recycled many times over.
Let's tell you, I am so thankful to Barbara and the Elmendorph Inn, because she said you're going to love these people, and I do love them. I have learned so much, and I'm sorry to admit I didn't study my history, but being, you know, I have to, seriously when I say this, doing the Remarkable series for myself, Donna, my husband, and everyone else that has been associated with it has been such a major learning experience for us. We've broadened any horizon that we were hoping that we could tap into, and we've met some great people through the Hudson Valley. Oh, this is interesting.
This was one of the things I had wanted to make sure and show you. One of the things about the 1860s that I also like are a lot of the arts that were done back then, or to us today, they're arts. For them, it was commonplace kind of stuff. This is hair jewelry.
I was just going to ask you, is that human hair?
These are pieces of jewelry that were made out of human hair and or horse hair. Sometimes horse hair was used to give it a little stiffening. But this is a watch fob right here, and you can see the different patterns along the way. These are 2 earrings that my husband had given to me for Christmas. We found them in Gettysburg for the when we were at Remembrance Day a couple of years ago, and they were a gift to me by my husband. And
would they be? Would that be the clasp on them, the locking?
Yes. If you look at period pieces of jewelry, you'll notice that they don't have the kind of locking clasp that we have today. They have just a little hook that comes around. That this just hooks into, and that would have, earrings were very common, and the kind that dangle were a real common style of earrings of the time period. This is an example of a woman's watch. Again, we believe that it's from that period. We've been trying to do the research to identify. On watches, you can oftentimes look at markings, the silver markings and things like that, to try and come up with a date. And this certainly is, certainly the style of it is certainly within the time period, but I can't exactly date this particular watch. But
It has an initial on the front here.
right? It has an initial on the front. I don't know who the original owner was, but there's some, you can get into the back.
There's something written here, too.
Yep. One of the things you can do is date watches by some of the mechanisms in the back, and we've been looking at that. I just don't have a definitive answer on it. But it
That's beautiful, though. Now, these are so interesting. So, say a lady would snip a piece of her hair, possibly to make a Christmas gift or a seasonal.
They would have perhaps made it for themselves. They could have made it. They could have cut pieces, like for example, with my husband going off to war, I might have captured some of his hair, or I may have taken some of my hair and made some piece for him.
And put it in a locket. I was shown that.
Yeah, and put it in a locket. Hair was a way of kind of keeping a piece of you close by to someone. Some of the most elaborate hair art is associated with mourning. There's a very elaborate, you'll see sometimes pictures that have flowers and very intricate designs that are woven or macrameed or whatever out of hair. And I mean, you're talking about some extremely detailed, tedious work in order to be able to make that. One of the children that's here today, her mother is coming this evening, and she's actually made some hair art out of their hair, and it's something I've been starting to learn. There's a Japanese art right now that's still active that actually is the same kind of basis for this, but I've been looking for where to get some real hair that I can play with before I start messing around with my own hair.
Well, I'll tell you, I went down to Wilderstein in Rhinebeck, and there was this beautiful ornament on the table, and I asked some information. And I was told that years back, they would cut pieces of their hair for a mourning of a deceased person and weave it into these dry floral arrangements. I never knew that before. I found that so interesting. So what I want to do here is just, I'm going to ask Donna if she can come in, just put an earring right here, because was that crocheted, or was that, well, not crocheted, but
this one actually, there's a lot of different techniques, but no, that is not crocheted. If you look at it, it's a finely woven type of pattern.
and what would they weave it with?
Hair. Do you remember?
No, I mean, with an instrument or just by hand?
Do you remember as a child having a tube that you had yarn that you would?
right.
Okay, it's similar. It's a similar kind of concept that you would make a tube type thing like that.
Yeah, we used to make all the keychains when we went away to camp.
Right. Okay. It's very similar. If you look closely at these, some of these look very similar to the kind of pattern you would have made.
Put this here so maybe Donna can.
Let me get this off.
I must tell you, I have had such an interesting time with your group here. And from the bottom of my heart, I know how expensive this type of hobby can be, but you are giving future generations the insight. How can I word this in the way I want to? We learn about things in school, but not as intensely as if you come here and you spend even 3 or 4 hours. I've learned so much about the Civil War being here, but more important, I've learned about what the man's role was in the Civil War and what the women did during the Civil War and their contributions to the Civil War. Not only with the cooking and everyday women things, it was a change in the sense that women were coming into their own, and you had a voice.
Well, the women's movement actually started around 1830. And the first women caucus was in Seneca was in 1858. And the women's role was definitely changing during that time frame. It's a really interesting study, and it's one that's often overlooked. So Thank you for that comment.
You're welcome. And I will tell you, I've asked this group of women if they would please, 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 please come back, and we'll just do a show on the women's group, because I would truthfully love to do that, and bring it to you. So we'll be right back. I would like to thank you both so much for having us here today, and I hope the people in the communities that see these shows are just a little bit more enriched about the history in my hometown, which is Red Hook, my home village. And I think it was so clever to leave the wall and the ceiling opened for people to actually see the construction of the building.
Well, we get a lot of comment about those very features. And I know that that is one feature that we are so pleased that we added to the building.
And I want to ask, please, once again, that if anyone out there finds a picture or finds something in maybe a family diary pertaining to the Elmendorf, to please contact Barbara. And why don't you give the number?
You can call us at 758-5887. And we'd be delighted to hear from anybody. And if you want to know more about the Elmendorf Inn, we'd be happy to send you a brochure and perhaps one of our newsletters if you're interested. And you might want to put down the date of Sunday, December 5th, and come by to our annual Christmas open house, when the house will be decorated for the period. There'll be homemade cookies, hot mulled cider, and they'll be baking in the bake oven in the kitchen.
And I know we're going to be here filming, and we can't wait to bring that to you as well. Is there something, Bob, that I haven't touched on that you might want to recap for me, or?
Well, I think Barbara missed on Egbert Benson. He was our first Attorney General of New York State and our first president of the New York Historical Society. That's his background.
And that's why he's hanging over that mantle.
That's exactly why he's over the mantle.
And Barbara, is there something that you would like to say in closing?
Well, I'd just like to thank you for coming, Nancy. It was wonderful working with you. I'm so pleased that you got pictures of the Civil War reenactors, because that is the use of this building that we certainly enjoy, and it's nice to have it preserved on film. And thank you so much, and we'll look forward to having you come again.
Yes, I'm going to come for your Spinners meeting and for the Christmas reenactment. And I forget, there was one other you told me about, and I can't remember. But you'll see it as soon as we do it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for welcoming us warmly each week into your home. The Remarkable series, for me personally, I am so proud of it. And each week that we bring you a show, believe me, I've learned a little bit more about the Hudson Valley, the heritage of the Hudson Valley, and wonderful volunteers like these two, married 47 years. I mean, he could be off doing one thing, she could be off doing something else. But you find that it's the teamwork that makes this community sustain, and the history sustain. It's husband and wives and brothers and mothers and fathers and sons that keep us going. So you stay well, take care, and we're going to leave on the last message. The number for the Elmendorf again, Barbara,
is 758-5887.
So call the Friends of the Elmendorf. See you next week. Stay well.